What follows is a compilation of the worst decisions tourists have ever made on safari. Moments captured on dashcams, phones, and CCTV, where a single step out of a car or over a barrier ended in a body bag. Different parks, different countries, different animals, the same pattern every time. The signs were there, the warnings were loud, the rules were printed in every language the park could think of. And still, these people went ahead anyway. On July 23, 2016, a 32-year-old woman named Zhao took her husband, her young child, and her 57-year-old mother to Badaling Wildlife World, a drive-thru safari park near the Great Wall in Yanqing District, northwest of Beijing. It was a popular family day trip. See the wall in the morning, drive through a wild Africa-style park in the afternoon. The plan was simple. The execution went wrong almost immediately. The family's white sedan rolled into the tiger zone, where the rules are not subtle. Loudspeakers repeat them on a loop. Signs warn in Mandarin and English. Visitors sign waivers before they enter. Nobody ever leaves the vehicle. The Siberian tigers wandering between cars are not exhibits behind glass. They are full-grown apex predators in the open, capable of running down a deer in seconds. Inside the car, an argument broke out between Zhao and her husband. CCTV footage caught what happened next, and the world has been replaying it ever since. The passenger door swings open. Zhao steps out onto the road, casually, the way you might at a parking lot. She walks around the front of the car toward the driver's side. Behind her, lying in the grass, a tiger lifts its head. It moves before she sees it. One sudden burst of orange and black, and she is on the ground, dragged sideways into the brush. Her husband and her mother panic. They throw open their own doors and run after her, into a free-roaming tiger enclosure with multiple big cats. A second tiger appears within seconds. It hits the 57-year-old grandmother at full speed. Park staff in green vehicles raced into the zone, using their trucks to push the tigers back. Zhao was pulled out alive with serious bite wounds. By the time crews could safely reach her mother, the older woman was already dead, killed by the kind of crushing neck bite that, in tiger attacks, almost always proves instantly fatal. The official Chinese investigation later concluded that the main cause of the tragedy was the visitors' failure to follow safety rules. Authorities placed responsibility primarily on the family. Zhao herself attempted to sue the park, claiming she had felt dizzy and believed they were in a safe zone. Chinese social media did not take her side. Many users said she had only herself to blame for what happened to her mother. A waiver, loudspeakers, signs, a tiger sleeping 10 meters away, and one swung-open door that turned a family argument into a funeral. The white tiger enclosure at New Delhi's National Zoological Park is built like a small canyon. A high viewing platform looks down into an open pit where the animals roam freely. Between the visitor and the tiger is a low wall, a moat, and a clear understanding. Stay behind the barrier. On September 23, 2014, a 19-year-old man named Maksud ignored every part of that arrangement. He came from a poorer neighborhood of New Delhi, an ordinary city kid out at the zoo on a Tuesday afternoon. The crowd was thick around the white tiger exhibit. People were filming. Maksud pushed his way to the front, leaned over the barrier, and, according to witnesses, climbed up and sat on the low wall to get a better view. Other visitors shouted at him to get down. He didn't. He slipped. Whether he lost his balance or fell after sitting on the ledge has been debated, but the result was the same. He tumbled into the moat at the base of the pit and landed bruised but alive. He pressed his back against the concrete wall and looked up. The white tiger, named Vijay, was 20 meters away. He turned his head. He started walking. What followed was filmed on dozens of phones from the platform above. The tiger moved slowly, almost curiously, head low, tail twitching. He circled the trapped man, sniffed him, sat down in front of him for a moment, as if studying him. From above, visitors screamed. Some threw stones and bottles to try to distract the cat. It made no difference. After several long minutes, Vijay closed the distance and struck. He grabbed Maksud by the neck and shoulder, lifted him off the ground, carried him across the moat, and dragged him into a shaded corner. The struggling stopped quickly. The cause of death was a powerful bite to the neck that severed major blood vessels, combined with deep lacerations and damage to the spine, the way wild tigers kill prey by design. Zoo staff had no tranquilizer team standing by at the pit. They tried to drive the tiger away with sticks and shouting. It worked only when Vijay was finally lured into an indoor section. By then, Maqsood was long dead. The zoo director told reporters the man jumped into the enclosure and had crossed the safety barrier. A police spokesman confirmed he had gone beyond the prescribed safe zone. No charges were filed. The viewing platform reopened. The signs are still there. Some safari deaths come down to a moment that lasts less than 10 seconds. In 2023, at a drive-thru wildlife park in China, a young woman in her 20s or early 30s stepped out of her vehicle inside the tiger zone. The decision, reportedly to get a better photograph, was the last one she ever made. The format of these parks is built around one rule. The car is your shell. As long as you stay inside, with the doors closed and windows up, the tigers see a metal box and lose interest. The moment you step out, you are something different. You are a small, slow, soft-skinned animal moving alone in their territory. They notice. They commit. Her car had slowed near a group of visible tigers. Her family was reportedly inside, reaching for phones, when she opened her door, climbed out onto the asphalt, and began walking a few paces forward, camera in hand. From a tiger's perspective, the change was immediate. A car full of people had become one isolated person standing in the open. A tiger that had been lying in the grass stood up. It lowered its head. The standard predator sequence, stalk, sprint, leap, happens faster than most people realize. By the time her companions noticed what was happening, the tiger was already in motion. It crossed the gap in seconds, slammed her to the ground, and locked its jaws into her upper body. She was dragged off the road and into the brush. Her family, trapped inside the car, watched and screamed. Park staff and patrol vehicles raced in, using their trucks and sirens to push the tigers away. By the time they could safely reach her, she was already dead. The cause of death matched what coroners describe in case after case: a crushing bite to the neck, severed arteries, and massive internal trauma from the shaking. Chinese authorities responded the way they always have to incidents in these parks. Their statement said the woman had failed to comply with park rules and that the tiger had behaved according to its natural instincts. Animal welfare groups pointed to the case as one more example of why drive-thru predator parks are a category of attraction that should not exist. The park reopened. There is a phrase that gets repeated in news coverage of these deaths. The visitor left the safety of the vehicle. It is always written calmly, the way you would describe someone forgetting their umbrella. The reality, captured on dashcam after dashcam, is that leaving the safety of the vehicle is what dying looks like. The visitors driving through Safari World Bangkok on the morning of September 10, 2025, thought they were filming a routine lion section. Cars rolled forward at 5 kilometers an hour, phones pointed out of windows. A small group of lions, 5 of them, lounged near the road. Then a park truck pulled in, the door opened, and a man in a uniform stepped out among them. The footage from the tourists' cars is what the world saw next. The man was Jian, a 58-year-old keeper who had worked with these lions for years. He knew their names. He fed them. He was experienced enough that the park trusted him to enter the enclosure for routine work. Why he chose that moment, with tourist traffic moving past, to leave his vehicle is still under investigation. What is certain is that the lions did not see what he saw. To Jian, they were familiar animals. To the lions, he was a small, upright, isolated creature that had separated itself from the metal boxes the rest of the humans were inside. Their body language shifted in seconds. Heads up, eyes locked, bodies tense. From the tourists' phones, you can see one lion stand and start walking. The first one hit him from the side. The others followed within a heartbeat. 5 lions, working as a coordinated pack, knocked him to the ground in a rolling cloud of dust and fur. The autopsy later found that he died from multiple deep bite and claw wounds, a broken neck, and torn arteries. The fatal damage came from the same anatomy that kills antelope on the savanna, a crushing neck bite that severs the major blood vessels. Tourists in the cars started honking and screaming. Some threw open their windows to shout. Park staff radioed for help and rushed in with vehicles, using engines and noise to drive the lions back. By the time they reached him, Jian was already gone. He was pronounced dead at the hospital. Safari World closed sections of the park temporarily. Thai authorities opened an investigation into the safety protocols. An animal welfare spokesperson told reporters the incident highlights the risks of wildlife tourism and that wild animals are not entertainers but unpredictable predators. The lions, including a dominant male called Trump, were isolated and observed but not put down. The official position was that they had acted on instinct. For the families watching from their cars, the lesson was the same lesson the signs had been printing for years. The rule about staying in the vehicle is not a tourist rule, it is a human rule. The animals do not check for uniforms. In early 2026, a 79-year-old American retiree boarded a flight to Africa for the trip she had been saving for. She would not come home alive. Reports from a southern African national park describe an open vehicle game drive that turned, in seconds, into one of the most common categories of fatal safari accident, a mistimed encounter with an elephant herd. Her family later called it the trip of a lifetime. The morning game drive took her group out in an open 4x4, the kind with no doors and only a roll bar between you and the bush. They were looking for elephants. They found a herd. The herd had calves. That detail mattered more than anyone in the vehicle understood. Elephant matriarchs are protective in a way that does not negotiate. The guide stopped the vehicle close enough for the tourists to lift their phones and frame a clear shot. The animals went on grazing. For a moment, it was the picture postcard moment they had paid for. Then, the warnings began. One of the elephants, either an agitated bull or a matriarch, turned her head toward the truck. Ears flared wide, trunk up, a few heavy stomping steps in their direction. A trumpet. In elephant language, this is the last warning before the conversation ends. The vehicle did not back away fast enough. According to safari safety experts, this is the most common error in elephant-related tourist deaths. Vehicles get too close for a better view, the elephant signals its discomfort, and the guide either underestimates the threat or stays put for one more shot. Most elephant attacks on tourists happen when vehicles get too close for a better view or photo, one expert told reporters covering the incident. The elephant charged, several tons of muscle and bone closing the distance at a speed that gives a Land Cruiser almost no time to react. The driver shouted and hit the accelerator. He was hit anyway. The elephant slammed into the side of the truck where the older woman was sitting and, by some accounts, lifted and overturned the vehicle. She died from the impact, crushing injuries, broken ribs and spine, severe internal bleeding, the kind of damage medical staff cannot reverse no matter how fast they reach the scene. The guide radioed for help. Rangers arrived within minutes and tried to resuscitate her. It made no difference. Her body was transported to a local clinic and later prepared for repatriation to the United States. The park promised a review of approach distances and additional training for guides on reading elephant behavior. An official said simply that elephants are wild animals and can be unpredictable, especially when calves are present, a sentence that gets repeated in various forms after almost every incident of this type. The vehicle had stopped too close. The matriarch did the only thing matriarchs do. Beekse Bergen. Safari Park in Hilvarenbeek, Netherlands, is one of Europe's largest drive-thru safaris, the kind of place where you can roll your window down for a wallaby, but not for a cheetah. On September 26, 2022, a German class trip arrived for what should have been an ordinary school day. 3 boys decided that ordinary was not enough. The 17-year-old at the center of this story was on the visit with classmates and teachers, walking the marked pedestrian route through the safe sections of the park. The route is designed to be impossible to misunderstand. Signs in Dutch, English, and German tell visitors where they can and cannot go. Metal grids in the ground separate human territory from animal territory. Staff paths are marked as such. Everything is built around the assumption that visitors will read. 3 friends decided to ignore all of it. They peeled off from the group, took a side path used by employees, and stepped over an animal grid into the Cheetah enclosure, the part of the park where cars normally drive past with windows up. Their motivation, according to staff and reports afterward, was the predictable cocktail of bravado and curiosity. They wanted to see the cheetahs up close. Cheetahs are not lions. They are smaller. They look almost dog-like. They have a public reputation for being the nice big cat. None of that mattered the moment 3 humans walked into their territory on foot. To a cheetah used to seeing windowed metal boxes drive past, 3 slow human silhouettes were something new and worth investigating. One of the cheetahs lying in the grass lifted its head. Then it stood up. Then it began to stalk. The boys realized something was wrong only when the cat was already accelerating. Cheetahs are the fastest land animals on Earth. There is no outrunning one. It covered the ground in seconds, leapt at the 17-year-old, knocked him down, and sank its teeth into him. His friends screamed and ran. Park staff responded fast, racing to the area, scaring the cheetah back and pulling the bleeding boy out. He survived. He was rushed to hospital with multiple bite wounds and deep lacerations across his body, declared out of life-threatening danger after surgery, and faced a long recovery. A park spokesperson stated that the teenager had ignored several warning signs in multiple languages, including German. Another official statement put it more bluntly: a visit to the park is safe as long as visitors follow the rules. The case was not isolated. Bergen had had previous cheetah incidents, including one where an entire family stepped out of their car. After this attack, the park made a final decision. The auto safari route through the cheetah enclosure was removed entirely. The animals stayed. The road did not. The boy survived because the cheetah was small enough that staff could intervene in time. The next teenager who tries the same trick at a different park with a different cat may not be as lucky.
Our journey begins in September 2012, high in the Austrian Alps. A British couple, including a 38-year-old mother of 4, were on the final leg of an epic European motorcycle tour. They had been on the road for weeks, covering thousands of miles, a testament to their shared passion for riding. But on this day, the idyllic adventure was about to come to a horrific end. The weather in the mountains was unpredictable, the roads were winding and treacherous, and their motorcycle was heavily laden with luggage. They were experienced riders, but experience can sometimes breed a dangerous sense of complacency. In a sharp, winding section of the road, the driver lost control. Whether it was a moment of distraction, a patch of wet asphalt, or simply a case of pushing the bike beyond its limits, we'll never know for sure. The motorcycle crashed, and the impact was catastrophic. The woman, a mother who had 4 children waiting for her back in the UK, was killed. Her partner survived. It's a tragic story of get-there-itis, the dangerous mindset that pushes riders to continue on, even when conditions are telling them to stop. They had come so far and were so close to the end of their journey, but their refusal to respect the mountain's warnings cost them everything. On April 20, 2019, a 42-year-old man and his 40-year-old wife from Wichita Falls, Texas, were out for a ride on a clear, sunny day. They were on a rural highway near the town of Vernon, a classic American landscape of wide open spaces. The driver was not wearing a helmet, a legal but ultimately fatal choice in the state of Texas. As they were cruising along, a large vulture, likely feeding on roadkill, took flight from the side of the road. It flew directly into their path. The bird, which can weigh up to 5 pounds with a wingspan of nearly 6 feet, struck the driver squarely in the head. The impact was like being hit with a feathered cannonball. He was killed instantly, his body slumping, over the handlebars. The motorcycle, now without a driver, veered off the road and crashed. The woman was thrown from the bike and suffered critical injuries. She was rushed to the hospital, but died shortly after. It was a freak accident, but one that was made infinitely more deadly by a single, dumb decision: to ride without a helmet. In a state full of large birds and other unpredictable wildlife, a helmet isn't just a piece of safety gear. It's the only thing standing between you and a 1-in-a-million tragedy. In July 2021, Bradley and Michelle Wright, a couple from Bradford, UK, were on a motorcycle vacation in the scenic countryside of Northumberland. They were with a group of friends, enjoying the freedom of the open road, doing what they loved, as their friends would later say. But the beautiful, winding roads of Northumberland are also notoriously dangerous, a popular spot for tourists who often underestimate their complexity. On a narrow, rural road near the village of Simonburn, their vacation came to a sudden, violent end. They were involved in a head-on collision with a car. The exact details of the crash are unclear, but the police report pointed to the usual suspects: excessive speed on an unfamiliar road, and a moment of misjudgment on a blind corner. Both Bradley and Michelle were killed. It's a story that plays out all too often on scenic tourist routes: the feeling of being on vacation, the adrenaline of the ride, the presence of friends. It all combines to create a dangerous sense of overconfidence. You push it just a little bit harder, you take a corner just a little bit faster, and you forget that you're not on your home turf. For Bradley and Michelle Wright, that holiday high had a devastatingly low price. In May 2023, on the border highway in El Paso, Texas, a group of 3 friends were out for a ride. One of the motorcycles was carrying a couple, a man and a 29-year-old woman. They were riding fast, enjoying the thrill of the group ride, the feeling of being part of a pack. But group rides can be deceptive. They can create a false sense of security and a dangerous sense of competition. According to police, the motorcycle carrying the couple was traveling at a high rate of speed when it entered a curve. The driver lost control, and the bike slammed into a concrete barrier and a light pole. The couple was thrown from the motorcycle, their bodies hitting the pavement with lethal force. They both died at the scene. The third rider, who was riding behind them, was also involved in the crash but survived with injuries. This is a classic example of a group ride turning tragic. The dynamics of the group, the pressure to keep up, the temptation to show off, can lead to reckless decisions. You're no longer just responsible for yourself. You're responsible for the person on the back of your bike and for the other riders around you. This couple paid the ultimate price for forgetting that simple, crucial fact. In September 2023, a British couple, both in their 60s, were on a motorcycle holiday in the sunny region of Murcia, Spain. They were, by all accounts, experienced riders. They had been riding for decades, and this was just another one of their many adventures. But experience can be a trap. It can lead to a dangerous belief that you've seen it all, that you're immune to the risks that plague less experienced riders. They were riding on a busy Spanish highway, their bike loaded with luggage, sharing the road with a chaotic mix of local traffic and long-haul trucks. Under these stressful conditions, something went wrong. The motorcycle lost balance, and the couple was thrown onto the roadway, directly into the path of other vehicles. They were both killed in what the Spanish press described as a horror crash. Their friends were shocked, describing them as safe, experienced riders. But their experience in the UK didn't prepare them for the unique challenges of a Spanish highway. The heat, the different driving styles, the stress of navigating an unfamiliar environment, it all adds up. This couple fell into the experience trap, believing that their years of riding had made them invincible. They were wrong. Isolde and Otto Negele, a German couple in their 50s, were on their dream motorcycle vacation in Ireland. They were exploring the famous Wild Atlantic Way, a route known for its stunning beauty and its treacherous, narrow roads. They were tourists in an unfamiliar land, on roads that are notoriously difficult even for locals. On the N59 near Ballina, County Mayo, their dream vacation turned into a nightmare. They were involved in a collision with another vehicle. The exact cause is unknown, but local police pointed to a familiar pattern. Foreign tourists on powerful motorcycles, treating the narrow, winding, often wet Irish B-roads like the smooth, wide autobahns of their home country. Both Isolde and Otto were killed. Their deaths became a local talking point, a tragic example of the dangers of motorcycle tourism. They were victims of the tourist trap, the mistaken belief that a scenic road is a safe road. They had the right bike, the right gear, but the wrong mindset for the environment they were in. They were riding in Ireland, but their heads were still on the Autobahn. This next story, from the Cleveland area, is one of the most tragically stupid on our list. A young pregnant woman was riding as a passenger on the back of her husband's motorcycle. They already had a 2-year-old child at home, and another on the way. The decision to get on that motorcycle, in her condition, was a gamble with not 1, but 2 lives. And it was a gamble they lost. They were involved in a crash, and the woman was thrown from the bike. Her injuries were catastrophic. Emergency services were unable to save her or her unborn child. She died, leaving behind a grieving husband and a toddler who would grow up without a mother. The local media described it as a tragic crash, but it was more than that. It was a tragedy born from a moment of profound, almost unbelievable stupidity. To put a pregnant woman on the back of a motorcycle is to ignore the most basic, fundamental instinct to protect your family. It's a decision so reckless, so selfish, that it defies all rational explanation. This man didn't just lose his wife and his unborn child. He lost them because of a choice that should never have been made. On the night of October 5, 2025, on a busy boulevard in Ridley Township, Pennsylvania, a group of friends were out for a fun ride. 26-year-old William Getty was driving one bike, with 28-year-old Katrina Pinnell on the back. A friend was riding on another bike nearby. None of them were wearing helmets. They were riding too fast, too close together, a mini-pack of 2 bikes tearing through the night. On McDade Boulevard, their fun ride came to a catastrophic end. The 2 motorcycles clipped each other, a moment of misjudgment that had a domino effect. William and Katrina were thrown from their bike, their unprotected heads hitting the pavement with lethal force. They both died. Their friend, the other rider, survived with serious leg injuries. This is a story of collective stupidity. It's not just one person making a bad decision. It's a group dynamic where recklessness is encouraged and safety is seen as an afterthought. No helmets, riding too close at night. It was a trifecta of dumb decisions that left 2 people dead and another permanently injured. They went out for a fun ride, but they never came home. Our final story, from a highway in India in late 2025, is a perfect, tragic encapsulation of our modern era. A young couple, in their 20s, were on a sport motorcycle, creating content for an Instagram reel. A friend was riding alongside, filming their every move. The scene was set for the perfect viral video. The man was driving, trying to look cool and confident. The woman was sitting sideways on the back, her body pressed against his, a romantic, carefree pose. Neither of them was wearing a helmet. They were performing for the camera, using the live highway as their film set, and their own lives as props. At high speed, the driver started doing stunts, weaving through traffic, showing off for his audience of 1. And then, he lost control. The bike went down, and the couple was thrown onto the asphalt, sliding for tens of meters as other cars and trucks swerved to avoid them. According to eyewitness reports, at least one of them was killed. Their final romantic video became a viral snuff film, a horrifying warning about the deadly consequences of chasing online clout. They died for a few seconds of content, a final, fatal performance in the theater of social media. Madeline Davis was living the dream. At just 21 years old, the British beauty and lifestyle influencer had built a following by documenting her travels across the globe. In January 2020, she was in Australia, enjoying the vibrant nightlife of Sydney and the stunning coastal scenery of New South Wales. She was young, outgoing, and part of a generation that viewed every experience through the lens of social media content. To Madeline, a beautiful view wasn't just something to see, it was something to capture and share. On the night of January 11th, Madeline and a group of friends had been out partying in Sydney. As the night began to wind down, they decided they weren't ready for the fun to end. They made a plan to head to Diamond Bay Reserve in Vaucluse to watch the sunrise. Diamond Bay is famous for its dramatic, sheer cliffs that drop straight into the churning Pacific Ocean. It's also notorious as a selfie cliff, where tourists frequently ignore safety barriers to get that perfect, edge-of-the-world shot for Instagram. When the group arrived in the pre-dawn darkness, they didn't stay behind the safety fences. Despite the clearly posted warning signs and the obvious danger of the 30-meter drop, they climbed over the barriers to reach the rocky ledges closer to the edge. In the dim, early morning light, with the ground potentially uneven or damp from the sea spray, the margin for error was zero. As they were posing and focusing on their screens, the group suddenly realized Madeline was gone. She had simply vanished from the ledge. The panic was immediate. Her friends called emergency services, and a massive search operation was launched involving police, marine rescue, and cliff rescue teams. It took hours to locate her. Madeline had fallen from the cliff, likely suffering massive blunt force trauma upon impact with the rocks or the water before drowning in the surf. Her body was eventually recovered from the base of the cliffs. It was a tragic end for a young woman who had everything ahead of her, all for a photo that was never even taken. In April 2024, a 31-year-old Chinese tourist named Huang was visiting the stunning landscapes of Indonesia with her husband. They were part of a guided tour exploring the Ijen volcano in East Java, a place famous for its blue fire and the surreal beauty of its crater. For many tourists, reaching the rim of a volcano is a bucket list achievement, and Huang was determined to document the moment in style. She wasn't dressed for a rugged hike. She was dressed for a photo shoot, wearing a long, flowing dress that looked beautiful against the volcanic backdrop, but was a disaster waiting to happen on a narrow rim. The group reached the crater rim just before sunrise. One of the most popular spots for photos at Ijen is a gnarled, dead tree that sits precariously close to the edge of the crater. It's a dramatic spot, but it's also incredibly dangerous. Their local guide reportedly warned the couple multiple times to stay back from the edge, explaining that the ground was unstable and the drop was sheer. But the allure of the perfect social media post was too strong. Huang wanted a photo next to that iconic tree, and she wanted it to look effortless. As her husband stood back to take the pictures, Huang began to adjust her pose. She was focusing on the camera, trying to get the angle just right, and she began to step backward to frame herself against the crater. In that moment, the hem of her long dress caught on a rock, or perhaps her own foot. She tripped, her center of gravity shifting back over the 75-meter drop. There was no railing, no safety net, and no time for her husband or the guide to reach her. Huang tumbled backward over the rim, falling more than 250 feet down the steep, rocky slope inside the crater. The fall was violent and high energy, causing severe blunt force trauma that likely killed her instantly. It took rescuers over 2 hours to climb down the treacherous slope to reach her body. Her death became a viral cautionary tale across Asia, a stark reminder that nature doesn't care about your outfit or your follower count. When a guide tells you a spot is dangerous, they aren't trying to ruin your photo. They're trying to save your life. Manapools National Park in Zimbabwe is one of Africa's premier safari destinations, known for its raw beauty and the ability to see big game in a truly wild environment. It's a place for serious wildlife enthusiasts, often attracting affluent tourists who pay thousands of dollars for the privilege of a high-end safari experience. In September 2018, a 49-year-old German woman was part of such a group, enjoying a game drive through the park. She was surrounded by some of the most powerful creatures on Earth, but she seemed to have forgotten that she wasn't in a zoo. The group encountered a herd of elephants, a sight that is both majestic and intimidating. Standard safari protocol is absolute. You stay inside the vehicle at all times when near large animals. The vehicle provides a barrier and a sense of scale that usually keeps animals from feeling threatened. But this tourist wanted a closer look. She wanted a photograph that wasn't obstructed by the frame of the Land Cruiser. Despite the rules and the inherent danger, she opened the door and stepped out onto the ground, camera in hand. She began to approach the elephants on foot, trying to get that perfect close-up shot. To an elephant, a human on foot is a much more direct threat than a vehicle. One of the matriarchs, or perhaps a protective bull, noticed her movement and proximity. The animal didn't hesitate. It charged, covering the ground with terrifying speed. The woman had nowhere to go. She was knocked down and trampled by the multi-ton animal, suffering massive crush injuries, multiple fractures, and internal bleeding. The guides and other tourists could only watch in horror as the attack unfolded. They eventually managed to use the vehicle to drive the elephant away and reach the woman, but the damage was done. She was rushed to a medical facility, but she succumbed to her injuries later that same day. It was a senseless tragedy caused by a total lack of respect for the power of wild animals. She treated a 12,000-pound elephant like a prop for her vacation album, and she paid the ultimate price for that arrogance. Memorial Day 2022 was supposed to be a day of fun and sun for Supraja Alaparthi and her family. They were on vacation in the Florida Keys, a tropical paradise where the water is crystal clear and the activities are endless. Supraja, a 33-year-old mother from Illinois, decided to take her 10-year-old son and 9-year-old nephew parasailing. It's a classic tourist activity, one that feels safe because it's so common. You're strapped into a harness, lifted into the air by a parachute, and towed behind a boat. It's a bird's-eye view of paradise, but it relies entirely on the equipment and the judgment of the captain. As the trio was high in the air, the weather began to turn. The winds picked up significantly, far beyond what was safe for parasailing. The parachute became pegged, meaning the wind was hitting it with such force that it was no longer being towed by the boat. Instead, it was pulling the boat along. The captain, Daniel Couch, allegedly realized he had lost control. But instead of trying to winch them down or maneuver the boat to depower the chute, he made a fateful and widely criticized decision. He cut the tow line. Suddenly, Supraja and the two young boys were no longer attached to the boat. They were still 100 feet in the air, strapped into a fully inflated parachute that was now at the mercy of the gale force winds. They were dragged across the water for nearly 2 miles, powerless to stop their momentum. Ahead of them loomed the massive concrete and steel structure of the 7-mile bridge. They were heading straight for it at high speed. The impact was devastating. They slammed into the bridge structure before being plunged into the water. A nearby fishing guide, Captain John Gandy, saw the disaster unfolding and rushed to the scene. He managed to pull all 3 victims from the water and began performing CPR on Supraja as he raced toward the shore. Her son and nephew survived with injuries, but Supraja was pronounced dead. The captain of the parasail boat was later charged with manslaughter, but for Supraja's family, the dream vacation had already become a permanent nightmare. Ericeira is a picturesque coastal town in Portugal, famous for its surfing and its stunning views of the Atlantic. In June 2018, an adventurous couple, 33-year-old Michael Kearns from Australia and 37-year-old Louise Benson from the UK, were enjoying a romantic getaway in the area. They were experienced travelers who loved to document their journeys, and Ericeira offered plenty of beautiful backdrops. One night, they headed to a scenic stone wall that overlooks the Praia dos Pescadores beach. It's a popular spot for tourists to sit and watch the waves, but it also features a sheer 30-meter drop onto the sand and rocks below. Authorities believe the Whaikiai couple was sitting or standing on the narrow wall, likely trying to take a selfie together with the ocean in the background. At night, with the wind blowing off the Atlantic and the lack of clear visibility, the danger was magnified. Their phones and belongings were later found neatly placed on the wall, suggesting they had set them down to pose. In the middle of their romantic moment, something went wrong. A slip, a sudden gust of wind, or perhaps one of them losing their balance and grabbing the other in a desperate attempt to stay upright. They fell nearly 100 feet to the beach below. Because it was late at night and the area was quiet, no one heard them fall or saw the incident. Their bodies lay undiscovered on the sand until the following morning, when a beach worker arrived to clean the area. When emergency services arrived, it was clear that both had died on impact from severe head and body trauma. There were no signs of foul play. It was simply a tragic accident born from a moment of distraction. The news of their deaths was met with shock by their friends and family, who described them as a loving couple who lived life to the fullest. But their story also became another entry in the growing list of death by selfie incidents. They treated a high, unprotected coastal wall like a park bench, forgetting that a single misstep is all it takes to turn a beautiful memory into a final moment. They were focused on capturing the perfect image of their love, but they lost the chance to actually live it. Dean Sanderson was a 50-year-old from South Australia who was finally ticking off a major item on his bucket list. He and his wife, Sharon, were on a dream vacation to far north Queensland, exploring the ancient beauty of the Daintree rainforest. They wanted an adventure that would allow them to see the canopy from a unique perspective, so they booked a tour with Jungle Surfing Canopy Tours. The experience involved being harnessed and zipped between platforms high above the forest floor. It was marketed as a safe, thrilling way for people of all ages to experience the rainforest. On October 22, 2019, the couple was moving through the course with a group. For one particular section, they were clipped in together for a tandem ride, a 86-meter stretch between two high platforms. As they launched and began to glide over the lush greenery, something felt wrong. Sharon later recalled that they seemed to be moving much faster than they should have been, and the line was sagging lower than expected. She began to scream in terror, but Dean, ever the protective husband, tried to calm her down. He told her the guides were probably just messing with them to give them a scare. He couldn't have been more wrong. A catastrophic failure occurred in the cable system, or the way it was anchored to the platform. The line gave way, and the couple plummeted 25 meters, about 82 feet, straight down to the forest floor. They hit the ground with incredible force. Dean bore the brunt of the impact, suffering fatal head and chest injuries. Sharon survived the fall, but was left with serious injuries, and the trauma of watching her husband die beside her in what was supposed to be their greatest adventure. The investigation that followed revealed significant issues with the maintenance and safety inspections of the Zipline course. The company was eventually fined heavily, but for Dean Sanderson, the bucket list trip ended in the most literal and tragic way possible. He put his trust in a luxury adventure operator, assuming that the high price tag and professional branding guaranteed his safety. It was a reminder that even in the most controlled environments, gravity is unforgiving, and adventure always carries a risk that money can't fully erase. Agustin Escobar was a man who had reached the pinnacle of the corporate world. As a senior executive for Siemens, he lived a life of significant wealth and global travel. In April 2025, he was on holiday in New York City with his wife and 3 children. They were enjoying everything the Big Apple had to offer, and for a final grand treat, they booked a luxury sightseeing helicopter tour. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, a chance to see the iconic Manhattan skyline, the Statue of Liberty, and the Hudson River from a perspective that few ever get to see. The family boarded a Bell 206 helicopter, a reliable workhorse of the tour industry. They were strapped into their harnesses, headsets on, listening to the pilot point out the landmarks below. For the first few minutes, it was pure awe. The children were likely filming the view on their phones, captivated by the sight of the skyscrapers reflecting the afternoon sun. But as they were flying over the Hudson River, the dream turned into a nightmare. Witnesses on the ground saw the helicopter begin to descend erratically, tumbling through the air as if it had lost all power or control. The helicopter plunged into the cold waters of the Hudson and began to sink almost immediately. Emergency calls flooded in, and a massive rescue effort was launched by the NYPD, FDNY, and the Coast Guard. But a helicopter in the water is a death trap. The violent impact often knocks passengers unconscious or leaves them completely disoriented. As the cabin filled with murky river water, the very safety harnesses and headset cords that were meant to protect them became obstacles to their escape. Divers eventually reached the submerged wreck and pulled the family from the cabin, but it was too late. Agustin, his wife, and their 3 children all perished, along with the pilot. The investigation pointed toward a mechanical failure, but the tragedy sparked a fierce debate about the safety of the tour helicopter industry. For the Escobar family, their wealth allowed them to buy an incredible experience, but it couldn't buy them a way out of a sinking cabin. They normalized a high-risk activity as a casual vacation treat, and a single mechanical glitch wiped out an entire family in seconds. Catherine Chappelle had spent years working on some of the most technically demanding films in Hollywood. As a visual effects editor, she'd helped build entire worlds on screen. Fantasy landscapes, impossible creatures, things that looked real but weren't. In her personal life, she was drawn to the real thing. She volunteered for conservation projects and had a genuine passion for wildlife. On June 1, 2015, she was in South Africa at a lion park near Johannesburg, doing what she loved. Lion Park offered self-drive tours, vehicles moving through enclosures where lions roamed. The rules were posted clearly at the entrance and on signs throughout the park. Windows must remain closed at all times while inside the predator enclosures. Not as a suggestion, as an absolute requirement, enforced by every guide, printed on every map. The lions in those enclosures were not domesticated. They were large predators that had simply learned to tolerate vehicles. Catherine was in the passenger seat. She had her window down to get better photos. A lioness approached the car, not at a run, quietly, the way big cats move when they're curious or opportunistic. She came up alongside the passenger side, reared up, and thrust her head and shoulders through the open window. Her jaws closed around Catherine's neck and shoulder area. The guide, who was driving, tried physically to pull the lioness off. He suffered serious injuries to his arm in the attempt. He couldn't get her free. Catherine died at the scene from catastrophic neck wounds and massive blood loss. The story went around the world within hours. Every outlet used the same framing. Conservation volunteer, someone who cared deeply about animals, killed because she had the window down for a photograph. The park faced intense public criticism for the closeness of the enclosures, for the history of similar incidents, for a culture that marketed proximity to lions as a selling point. There were calls to euthanize the lioness. Wildlife organizations argued against it, pointing out the animal had done nothing wrong. What the coverage consistently noted, and what the park's own management acknowledged, was that the window rule existed precisely because this had happened before in similar parks, under similar circumstances, not as a theoretical risk, as a documented one. Catherine knew the rules. She had the window down anyway, for a few seconds, for a closer shot. The lioness moved through the gap in less time than it takes to react. The park's history made the aftermath particularly painful. There had been prior incidents at Lion Park and similar facilities. Warnings, near misses, cases where guides had intervened in time. The commercial model of a self-drive lion enclosure was itself built on a tension that no signage fully resolves. The appeal is proximity. The safety rule demands distance. Most of the time, the tension holds. Catherine's case is what happens when it doesn't. She was, by every account, someone who understood wild animals better than most tourists. That understanding didn't change what a lioness does when a gap presents itself. The photos were still on Omar Farangzin's phone when they found his body. Omar was 48 years old, from Italy, touring Romania's Carpathian Mountains on his motorbike in July 2025. The mountain roads through that region are spectacular, forested, winding, remote, and they're also known for roadside bears. Brown bears in the Carpathians have become accustomed to vehicles stopping, to tourists getting out, and in some areas, to being fed. Romanian authorities had put up signs, issued repeated public warnings, and made feeding the bears illegal. None of it had fully worked, because every year tourists stopped and fed them anyway, and the bears kept coming back to the roadside because of it. Omar stopped multiple times to take close-range photos with bears. The photos showed him near a female and her cubs, the specific combination that wildlife authorities warn about most explicitly, because a mother bear with cubs is not merely defensive. She is categorically dangerous to anything she perceives as a threat to them. On one of his subsequent stops, the bear charged. She seized him, dragged him approximately 60 meters down a steep gully off the side of the road, out of sight of the roadway. When authorities found him, the injuries were severe. Extensive bite and claw wounds across his torso and limbs. The kind of damage a large predator inflicts when it isn't warning, it's attacking. Officials described what they found in careful language that nonetheless conveyed the extent of it. The photos from earlier in the day became the before images in every news story. Omar standing near the bear. Omar smiling. The cubs in the background. The story circulated widely in the days that followed, attached to the phrase selfie with bear in almost every headline, as though the category explained the man. What it actually illustrated, for the wildlife authorities who'd spent years trying to prevent exactly this was the gap between how tourists perceive roadside bears, habituated, calm, essentially tame, and what those animals remain regardless of how often they've accepted food from a car window. Romanian officials used the coverage to renew their warnings. They threatened fines. The bears were still on the road the following week. The Carpathian bear situation is a specific kind of problem. Romania has one of the highest concentrations of brown bears in Europe, and decades of roadside feeding by tourists have conditioned many of them to associate vehicles and humans with food. An animal that associates people with food is not a tame animal, it's a dangerous one with reduced fear. Omar's photos showed a bear comfortable enough with human presence to stand nearby. What they didn't show was the calculation happening behind those eyes. Whether the thing in front of her was a food source, a threat to her cubs, or something to be removed from the immediate area, the distinction matters entirely to the bear and not at all to the person in the way. In May 2016, at the Yashanko Wildlife Zoo in Liaoning Province, China, a male visitor stood at the edge of the Walrus pool to take selfies. The walrus was directly behind him. He was filming it, turning to check the angle, performing the familiar choreography of a good wildlife photo. What made the shot seem achievable was that the zoo's own staff had been doing it for years, posing with the walrus, leaning over the pool edge, treating a 1-ton marine mammal like a cooperative colleague. The culture of the place had made it feel safe. The walrus surged out of the water, wrapped its front flippers around the man, and pulled him in. The keeper on duty jumped into the pool to help. What followed, and what was later described by witnesses and in subsequent reporting, was not a single violent event, but a sustained one. The walrus held both men, pulling them under, releasing them briefly, pulling them down again. A walrus's physical strength, its ability to control movement in water, and its weight make it essentially impossible to fight off in its own environment. Both men drowned. The deaths triggered significant public anger in China about zoos and wildlife parks that allowed, even encouraged, close physical interaction with dangerous animals as a commercial draw. The walrus had not been aggressive in the ordinary sense. It had not been provoked. It appeared to treat the humans in the water as objects to play with, which, from an animal of that size and strength, produces the same outcome as malice. Critics pointed to the absence of proper barriers between visitors and the pool, the lack of any emergency protocol capable of handling a situation in which a large marine animal had hold of 2 people, and the years-long practice of blurring the line between a wild animal and a photo prop. The zoo promised improved safety measures. The animal had done what walruses do when something enters their space. The humans entered voluntarily. What happened in that pool in Liaoning was, in a specific sense, the product of a performance that had been running safely for years. The walrus had been in these interactions hundreds of times, and nothing bad had happened. That track record was the problem. It created a set of expectations among the staff, the visitors, and possibly the animal about what those moments meant. The walrus that killed 2 men on an afternoon in May 2016 was the same walrus that had been photographed with staff and visitors for years. Nothing had changed except the outcome. Gareth Crowe had booked the kind of activity that appears in every Thailand travel brochure. He was 36, from Scotland, on holiday on Koh Samui with his partner and his 16-year-old daughter in February 2016. Elephant trekking. Tourists seated in metal chairs strapped to an elephant's back, moving through a forested path, is one of the most popular paid experiences in Southeast Asia. Millions of people do it every year. It feels safe because the operator is there, the mahout is there, the elephant is there every day, and the chairs are bolted on. On February 1st, during the trek, The mahout climbed down from his position on the elephant's neck to take photos of the family. It was a common practice, a bit of extra service, the classic shot of tourists high up on an elephant's back, something to take home. He stepped off to get the angle. Nobody remained in the control position. The elephant, 13 years old, became agitated. It turned on the handler and then on the riders. It threw people off its back. Gareth was thrown to the ground and then gored. One of the animal's tusks drove into his abdomen and chest area. He was trampled. He died from massive internal injuries. His daughter survived. Animal welfare organizations had been raising the alarm about trekking elephants for years before this incident. The animals used in these operations are typically trained through methods that cause chronic stress, overworked, underrested, managed through fear rather than genuine conditioning. A stressed animal is an unpredictable one. The mahout's decision to abandon the control position, even briefly, even just to take a photograph, removed the one mechanism that kept the situation manageable. Gareth's death was widely covered internationally and became a centerpiece of PETA's campaign to discourage elephant trekking entirely. Local authorities investigated the operator. No major criminal prosecution followed. The broader industry continued, though awareness of its risks, for animals and tourists alike, grew significantly in the years after. What makes this case distinct from the others in this episode is the role of the mahout's decision. He didn't malfunction. He did something extra, stepped away from his position to take a better photograph for the family he was guiding. The irony is almost too neat. The moment that led to Gareth's death was a gesture of hospitality, a small extra service. The photograph the mahout was trying to take became the last thing the family remembered from that day in the forest. The video was already circulating online before most people had heard the name of the park. On March 30th, 2024, 6 tourists were on a morning game drive in Kafue National Park in Zambia, in an open game viewer vehicle with a guide. They stopped to watch a bull elephant at what the guide assessed as a reasonable distance. It's a judgment call that experienced guides make dozens of times a day. How close is too close? Which animal is displaying agitation versus curiosity? When to hold and when to move? The elephant charged. The footage that later spread widely shows the guide reversing, the vehicle unable to clear the distance in time, and the elephant making contact. The impact flipped the vehicle. An 80-year-old American woman, unnamed in most reports at the family's request, was crushed by the overturned vehicle, by the animal's weight, by the combination of both. She died from massive, blunt force trauma. Wilderness Safaris, the operator, released a statement describing it as an unpredictable attack by an aggressive bull elephant. Safari operators and wildlife experts spent the following days debating the footage, whether the guide had misjudged the bull's mood, whether the escape route was adequate, whether the distance had ever been truly safe. Some defended the guide's decisions as reasonable, given what the situation looked like in the moment. Others pointed to standard protocol, maintaining clear escape routes, reading stress indicators in bull elephants, erring on the side of distance when in any doubt. What the video made viscerally clear to the millions who watched it online was something that safari marketing tends to soften. An open vehicle in a national park is not a controlled environment. The animals are not managed. The distances are judgments. A bull elephant in musth or in an agitated state is one of the most dangerous animals on Earth. And no combination of experience and protocol makes a collision survivable. The woman was 80 years old. She had come to Kafue to see elephants in the wild. She did. Roland Keller was driving a rental car through Kruger National Park in South Africa on November 10th, 2019. He was a Swiss tourist, self-driving on the park's public roads, one of the great, accessible wildlife experiences that Kruger offers, where anyone with a valid permit can move through the reserve at their own pace. Kruger has speed limits. It has extensive signage about wildlife on roads. It has a well-understood culture among regular visitors. Drive slowly, leave a margin, expect animals at any moment. The roads run through open bush, and large animals cross them constantly. A giraffe stepped onto the road ahead. A separate minibus, carrying 13 tourists, struck the animal. The collision launched the giraffe into the air. A multi-ton animal, the tallest in the world, came down directly onto Roland's oncoming car. The roof collapsed. The windshield went. He sustained catastrophic head and chest injuries from the impact and the collapsing metal above him. He was airlifted to hospital. He died from his injuries. South African national parks launched an investigation focusing on whether the minibus driver had been speeding or inattentive. At legal speeds, a collision with a giraffe on a Kruger road is still a severe accident. At excess speed, it becomes something else. No final determination was publicly reported, but the case was widely described afterward as a freak accident, a collision that couldn't have been predicted precisely because a giraffe doesn't announce itself before it steps onto a road. Roland did nothing wrong. He wasn't chasing a photograph or ignoring a warning. He was in his lane on a park road when a giraffe fell on him. That's what makes this one sit differently from the others. It isn't a story about a decision. It's a story about what a game park actually is when you take out the romanticized framing. A place where multi-ton animals move freely and roads run through it, and the margin for error is always smaller than it looks. Roland's death is the case in this episode that most resists the comfortable lesson. Every other story has a point at which a different choice would have produced a different outcome. Someone kept a window open, climbed a fence, fed a bear, left an elephant without a handler. Roland drove at legal speed on a park road and was in the wrong place when a giraffe was struck and fell. No rule he could have followed would have helped. No warning he could have heeded would have applied. That's the thing the brochures don't say. The sign on the enclosure at Cabug Island Mangrove and Wetlands Park in Zamboanga, Sibugay, in the Philippines, was straightforward. Chain link fence, clear boundary, a crocodile inside. On 28 April 2024, a 29-year-old male tourist approached the enclosure and looked at the animal. The crocodile wasn't moving. It lay still, the way saltwater crocodiles often do. Motionless for hours, so still that they can look exactly like a model. He decided it was fake. A statue, a prop, something the park had placed there for atmosphere. He wanted a photo with it. He climbed over the chain-link fence and walked up to the animal. People around him shouted for him to come back. He ignored them. The crocodile exploded off the ground. The burst of acceleration a large crocodile produces from a standing start is one of the fastest movements in the animal kingdom over a short distance. It lunged and clamped onto his arm. It dragged him toward the water and began the motion of a death roll, the rotation saltwater crocodiles use to tear tissue and disorient prey. He was pulled back out before it completed the process. He survived, with deep lacerations that required dozens of stitches and left him at serious risk of permanent damage to the arm. The video of the incident spread online immediately, generating the predictable mix of horror and dark humor. The park was criticized for fence height and supervision. But the fence had been crossed deliberately over the objections of bystanders by someone who had reasoned his way into believing that a living crocodile was decorative. The animal was motionless because that's how crocodiles wait. It moved when something came within range because that's what crocodiles do. Neither of those facts required any knowledge beyond what is generally known about crocodiles. He is the only person in this episode who went home. He left with fewer functioning tendons than he arrived with, and a story he'll be telling for the rest of his life.
Different parks, different decades, different animals, the pattern never changes. A sign nobody read, a door nobody should have opened, a wall nobody should have climbed, a vehicle that stopped too close. The animals in these stories were not malicious. They did exactly what their bodies are built to do. The humans were the variable. The humans made the choice. If you have ever been on safari, think back. Did you ever feel that pull to step out for a better photo, to lean in just a little further than the rules allowed? Tell me in the comments which case shocked you the most. If watching these stories made you grateful for the metal between you and the bush, hit like, hit subscribe, and stay sharp. The rules are printed in every language for a reason. Every word of them was paid for in blood.